So I'm going to introduce our very first speaker, which is Kent C. Dodds. Kent is the creator of testingjavascript.com, is an instructor on egghead.io, and maintains and contributes to a massive amount of NPM packages. Kent is going to come and talk about how to be encouraging and welcoming to new contributors, which is critically important. Please give Kent a huge round of applause.
Thank you. How many people get nervous when they stand in front of a group of people to speak? Okay, I'm not the only one. Good. I want to talk with you about building the open source community that we want. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, and I want to start out with my own story, my open source story. So as John mentioned, I maintain a lot of packages on NPM primarily. I'm a JavaScript engineer. And some of those packages I've inherited, others I've handed off to other maintainers, and many of those I'm actively maintaining today. But of course, I didn't start in the world of open source as a maintainer of projects. I, like everybody else who has been involved in open source, had my very first pull request, and I want to show you that. So this is my first pull request. It's a Java framework called the Play framework, and I just fixed a typo and added an extra line to the end of the file. Yeah, thank you. What's striking to me about this, what's special to me about this is not only that it was my first pull request, but the experience that I had in creating that pull request. I think that people, when they create their first ever pull request, they're nervous and they're not sure that they're doing things right. They're worried that they're going to do something wrong. And with my experience, James, who is a maintainer of that project, said, "Yeah, thank you so much. Here's the CLA. Could you please sign that?" And I did that. And then it was merged the next day. So the thing that I think is most notable about this experience is what James said. We're all going to die eventually, so we have a limited number of keystrokes left for the rest of our lives, right? And James gave me 32 of his keystrokes to say thank you. And I think it probably was just kind of a natural thing that he did. But it made me, as a brand new contributor, feel welcome and feel like I had a place in the open source community. And that's kind of what I want to talk about, is the type of open source community that we are trying to build in our different corners of this community that we're a part of. I want to tell you another story. This is one that I heard recently about a woman named Sharon Adams. When Sharon was a little girl, she lived in a community called Lindsay Heights in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And she loved her neighborhood. She would go on walks. She'd walk to school. She would talk with neighbors. And people would just sit on their porch and talk to each other. It was a really nice community. And then Sharon grew up. She moved away. She lived in New York for almost 30 years. And then she moved back to the very same home that she grew up in. And she was not really excited about the changes that had taken place. It was a dangerous community. There were drugs and violence and all sorts of unsavory things going on in that area. And she actually had 3 police captains tell her, "Don't go out, even during the day, because it's dangerous." And gunshots were a regular occurrence pretty much every day. She was really saddened by the change that had happened in her community, the one that she grew up in, that she loved. And she defied the police captains and just went on walks anyway, despite the dangers. Which were real, and she saw and experienced, and her neighbors experienced many of those dangers. But she invited her neighbors to go walking with her anyway. But it wasn't, walks aren't going to change that community. And one Christmas night, she and her husband Larry were looking out the window and saw this house across the street, and there were lights flickering. And Sharon said, "What are they? Are they lighting candles? Like, that's an abandoned house. Nobody lives there." And her husband said, "No, they're doing drugs over there." And they looked at each other and they said, "This is not right. This is not the community that we want to live in." And I think many of us would say, "Okay, well, let's move on to a place where we feel safer." But they looked at each other and said, this isn't right. And Larry was a contractor, and Sharon said, Larry, that's your next job, is that house. And so they worked together, and they totally remodeled the house. They made it into something that eventually was sold to a first-time home buyer through a loan that they facilitated that was a low-interest loan. And then they started doing this to many other houses in the area. And to this date, they have renovated over 100 homes in the area. There were a bunch of empty lots in the area as well, and those had turned into dump heaps where people would dump their tires or refrigerators or TVs, things that you can't easily get rid of, and they would just dump it in these empty lots. They cleaned all of those up, and they put in fruit orchards, and they grow over 400 pounds of fruit every year, which is just remarkable that they put the community together to turn this into the place that they wanted to live in. And this is what one of the insides of the homes looked like at the time that they started renovating to after they finished. And they've been able to turn this community completely around. The crime rate has dropped significantly in the last 20 years that they've been working on making this community one that they wanted to. They went to other communities that were the type of community they wanted to have, and they learned from the things that those communities were doing and applied it to their own. And they've started expanding beyond their own Lindsay Heights community into surrounding communities. And they formed a nonprofit called the Walnut Way nonprofit to facilitate doing all of these things. And this year they've accumulated a $50 million grant to continue in their efforts. I don't know if you noticed, but this is actually the home in that first picture. They renovated the home, and it was sold to a first-time home buyer, but I guess they bought it, and now it's the Walnut Way Center. Totally different experience. So the reason that of course, I think this is an inspirational story for anyone. The thing that I find so inspirational about Sharon and Larry is that moment, that Christmas night, when they saw people doing things that they didn't think were appropriate, and were the part of the community that they wanted. They were in this community that they felt unsafe physically, emotionally, and many other ways. And I don't think any of us could blame them if they decided to move away, move to a community that had more shared values. And I'm just going to be perfectly frank, nobody should judge anyone for leaving a community where they feel physically or emotionally or mentally unsafe. What's remarkable about Sharon and Larry is that they didn't, and they stayed anyway. And they made the community the place that they wanted to live. So how does this apply to our open source software community that we're trying to build? So I like this picture, this person in a birthday hat. They've got a wonderful experience that they're having, and they're sharing that experience with the person who's taking the picture and other people in the shot. And that's kind of what open source is. It's a wonderful experience where that we get to share with other people. We create this thing and we want to share it with others. And I think that's a special thing about open source. And I like to think of open source and just the general software community as kind of we're all holding these torches. And let's say only one of ours is lit. And let's say mine's lit. And I say, hey, Joe, I'm going to light your torch, and all that takes from me is just a little bit of effort to light someone else's torch. And my torch is not diminished in any way. It's just as bright as it always was, and now Joe's torch is lit. And so not only is he benefited from that experience, but actually all of us are benefited from that experience because now you have two lights in the room, and eventually we'll just light this whole room up. That's actually a bad metaphor, sorry. But hopefully you get the idea that it takes so little effort to make such a big impact, and the effort that it takes is pretty much just intention. And so what's the kind of intentional open source community that we want to build? The kind of open source community I want to be a part of is one that helps people when they stumble, that is encouraging to people who are just getting started. And rather than looking at somebody who's fallen and laughing, or just ignoring them, or hoping somebody else takes care of that problem, that we step it up and we help other people in their struggles to acclimate to this community. The kind of open source community I want to be a part of is one that defines and enforces good behavior. So things like the code of conduct for projects. I use the contributor covenant. It's a great code of conduct on my projects. And what I think the nice thing about having a code of conduct on your projects is that it not only does it deter bad acting, but it actually encourages people who stand to gain from feeling safe in that community. So people see that you have a code of conduct and you're interested in maintaining a positive experience for everyone in the community, and they feel like they can come in and contribute. I think there's a non-trivial amount of people who feel unsafe in the community, and it's up to us to make them feel safer. The part of the community that I want to be a part of is uplifting and helpful, especially to new people contributing to the open source world. So things like First Timers Only, this thing that Scott Hanselman and I started a few years ago about making special issues for brand new contributors, is exactly the types of initiatives that I want to see more in the open source community. Doing some hand-holding for these people who are just getting started, I think, is an important thing that is a part of the community that I want to be a part of. And by making it easier for these people who are just getting started, we can welcome them and their distinctiveness into our collective world of open source. The community I want to be a part of recognizes people for their contributions. So this All Contributors initiative that I started a few years ago recognizes people who contribute to open source projects and recognizes that those people aren't just in the contribution graph that GitHub gives you, but it's so many others. And so thanking them for the contributions that they're actually making to the project, I think, is a wonderful thing, and it's definitely the type of change that I want, or the type of community that I want to live in open source. So this is my challenge to you. I would like you to stop typing at the keyboard, stop adding your features, just pause for a moment. Look up from your computer, inspired, looking in an inspired direction for some sort of inspiration from above. And think, how is my community doing? We're all in different corners of the open source community. I'm in the JavaScript, specifically React side of things, lots of testing. You may be in the DevOps side of the open source world. Wherever you are, how can you make your corner of the community a better one? What are the rough spots or the less smooth spots of your community? And what are things that you can do to smooth those things out? Some intentional community building and improvement is what I want to see. And one of the things that I believe firmly is that it begins with us. It begins with our own behavior, and we can lead the rest of the community in the direction that we want our community to go. And actually, I just want to say that for this conference in particular, Todd is an amazing person. I don't know if you know, if you've interacted with Todd, but this conference is absolutely Todd made manifest. Wow, I want to be like Todd when I grow up. Just an amazing person, and I hope you get a chance to talk with him, even just for a minute. I always leave happier after I talk with Todd. So be the type of person that you want in your community, and that happens. It just naturally will come. And once you've decided the things that you can do to improve your community, then I hope you take those things and you do something great. Thank you very much.